Last week, Labour lost 52 seats to the Conservatives, nearly all of them in Leave voting constituencies in the Midlands and north of England. These losses have been blamed, for the main, on Labour backing a second referendum. It's a policy which my guest today, Ian Lavery, had long warned against, and Ian kept his Wansbeck seat in the northeast of England by the closest of margins on Thursday, I think down from an 11,000 majority to 1,000. So many of your predictions came true, as it were. I'm also joined by Ash Sarkar, contributing editor at Novara Media, lefty superstar. How are you both doing?
Well, I've been doing what I've been calling the self-flagellation roadshow, where basically I go on telly and someone new yells at me. So I've got someone from the right comes up and yells at me, and I've got to drink down my cup of sick. And then John Rentoul pops up looking like a centrist Tim Westwood and yells at me some more. But the good thing there is that it's given me the time and the space to really think through what it is I got wrong, from small to big. Small thing that I got wrong, and this turned out to be crucial for thinking about how the campaign was going, is that because polls were wrong in 2015, polls were wrong in 2016, polls were wrong in 2017, I thought polls must be wrong in 2019, and the only thing that matters is the direction of travel. And then that turned out not to be true. So in terms of where I thought the campaign was at and where we were actually at were two massively different things. Second thing that I got wrong is that Boris Johnson learned the lessons from 2017 and the left didn't. And that meant that we were unable to identify the things we got right, and we were unable to identify the things that could have been improved on. So there were certain things where I thought that we'd absolutely nailed down the argument on the economy, and then we could stretch into some of the more transformative goals, particularly on things like a 4-day week. And that wasn't able to happen in the way that I'd anticipated. And the big thing missing was that between 2017 and 2019, we could have used the movement for political education outside of our own circles. Didn't necessarily happen. And the third thing, which obviously I now look back on with a deep sense of regret, is the Brexit issue. Now, I think had Labour not shifted to a second referendum position, we still would have lost this election. However, there would have been, I think, a more even geographic spread of the loss of vote share, which could have yielded a different result in terms of the numbers of seats lost. The other thing that is different between shifting to a second referendum position and not shifting to a second referendum position is who you're sending a message to in terms of importance. Now, of course, Labour's base is hugely Remain supporting. It's got a huge amount of support from young people, BAME people, who are both from working class backgrounds as well. And it was really important to say that, no, this party has a home for you. But, and this is something which Novara Media's very own Craig Gent wrote in a recent article, which I encourage everyone to read, is while the Conservatives and Brexit Party fanned the confidence delivered by winning the referendum for their own cynical purposes, Labour became the party of steady on, asking Leave voters to gamble their sacred victory in order to appease a bunch of hard Remainers who never accepted that they lost, and worse yet, appeared to think that their votes ought to have been worth more than the votes of Leavers. And I think that Craig, who is both a very thoughtful writer, very kind and empathetic writer, and also an unflinching writer, gets it right. I think the move towards a second referendum position after the intensely polarizing European election without a strategy to shore up the Leave vote proved to be fatal in those red wall seats. I do think, however, not shifting would have come with huge drawbacks as well. And perhaps one of the big problems is that the case for not having a second referendum, for sticking with the customs union, that's being the compromise, the heart of the Labour Party never seemed to be quite in it. Not all the time.
There's plenty of issues to debate as we go on in the show there. First of all, I want to say, Ash has been in the TV studios getting harangued, I suppose, by centrists and right-wing journalists. You've just come from the first PLP meeting since the general election. That's the meeting of MPs and Labour lords. How was it?
It was very, very, very uncomfortable. I gave a speech. Jenny for me outlined the processes for the leadership contests in the early next year. And Jeremy gave a speech. He got polite applause, and unfortunately, a number of the members of the PLP severely attacked, brutally attacked, I've got to say, Jeremy Corbyn. The reality is politics it's a brutal business, but we've got a man like Jeremy Corbyn who I see is one of the most inspirational individuals I've ever met on a number of fronts. Not just, he's not the man that Tony Benn was in terms of the way in which he could articulate and speak, and great orator. But as an individual, I promise anybody that he's one of the most decent men I've ever met in my entire life. He's got more energy than most young people will ever have. He's more principled. And to see him, to be blamed really, not just at the PLP, but to be blamed by large swathes of the media, lots of people, lots of MPs from all sides of different parties, including the Labour Party. Quite frankly, it's not annoying. It's quite frankly, I'm emotional about it, because it's attacking a man who all his life has fought for the underdog, whether it be right across the globe or whether it be in the northeast or whether it be in the southeast. This man is a fantastic man. And it really was, for me, it's been heartbreaking since the election, because none was expected this, by the way. I did predict something along this lines, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as this. But I think to blame Jeremy Corbyn is absolutely irresponsible. It's an attack. Again, let me be honest, the reality is there's not many people in this country ever suffered the abuse from the general public, from the media, from all sides of the political spectrum than Jeremy Corbyn has. And you know what? That manifesto was the best manifesto that any political parties ever produced. The manifesto, I called it the Book of Hope. We went on a tour of the Leave constituencies, and very well received. And to think now that there's a huge attack on the manifesto itself for being a shopping list, a Christmas list, not credible. What's not credible about trying to take people out of poverty? What's not credible about getting rid of homelessness? What's not credible about paying people decent wages? What's not credible about the renationalisation of the railway, the water industry, rail mail and water? What's not credible? They're not even left-wing ideologies, man. And to think that this was a shopping list, it disturbs me. I think people are saying, Michael, they're saying that perhaps we shouldn't have offered hope to people, or perhaps we shouldn't have offered too much hope to people. Well, I've been up and down this country. I've been up and down the Leave not just the Leave constituencies, but that's huge issues in many of these constituencies that voted Leave, and we've got to begin to understand why they voted Leave in the first place. And we cannot just say to people, we'll offer you a little bit of hope, but not a lot. That manifesto, shopping list, no. Book of Hope, yes. Trying to transform society for good. And what comes with that, of course, is if you want to break the establishment, you've got to be ready for the huge, most vicious attacks. And I think that's what we've seen. I think this was a rerun of the 2016 referendum. Have a look at the statistics. You can make what you want out of any table of statistics, but we out of 60 seats were lost. 6 in Scotland were all Remain, 6 in Wales were all Leave, and 45 out of the 48 in England were Leave constituencies. The average swing was around about 11.5% away from the Labour Party to the Tories. People are terribly, terribly, terribly disenfranchised from politics. And I think we should have listened to what the people said in 2016. It's called democracy. And for the party was seen, wasn't it, to be a Remain party. We seemed at all junctures within Parliament to try and, challenge the fact that the 17.4 million people had actually been on the winning side. And we tried to put amendments in. We tried to put record amendments in to try and scope our Brexit. It's been the biggest mistake, in my view, that the Labour Party has ever made in its history. And as a consequence of that, and other issues, we've got the situation which we find ourselves in today.
So there's one place where I would disagree, and that's saying that, in hindsight, we could have respected the vote, stuck with it, and we'd be in a much better place. I think that what Labour tried to do is go from one compromise option, which was the soft Brexit customs union option, to what they deemed was another compromise option, which was second referendum with Remain and the customs union negotiated deal on the ballot. And in neither case, I think, was able to start doing the really hard work of persuading either its own base within the party, so the work of persuading heavily Remain-leaning membership, why that was not going to be possible considering the composition of its electoral coalition. I think some individuals in the Labour Party did it, but I think that in terms of that conversation happening loudly, consistently from the start, and that real hard work of persuasion didn't quite happen. And I think one of the reasons for that is lots of people were still in shock over the 2016 referendum. I was still in shock about the 2016 referendum. The full weight of it hadn't quite sunk in. Then when it came to being in Parliament and voting against Theresa May's deal, voting for extensions, is that in the absence of a really compelling story, and this is where I think you're right, in terms of, well, if we're saying that we're respecting the referendum result, but at these quite basic junctures of where an opportunity to get the first stage of a withdrawal bill over and done with, we're voting it down rather than either supporting it or abstaining, it muddies the story that's trying to be told here. And then there was a shift to a second referendum with the expectation of there would be at least a constellation of interests from people who were supporting parties which were largely in favour of a second referendum with the option to remain, is that shifted the Liberal Democrats into a position where they're essentially the Brexit party but in yellow and supportive of Remain, where there was no option that they would countenance bar the most extreme version of what they wanted. And it was able in lots of ways to sort of solidify and entrench this idea of Brexit as a culture war, where it was a zero-sum game, either one side completely won or the other side completely lost. And I think in terms of Labour's two attempts to shape some kind of compromise, it was neither able to depolarise Brexit as an issue and would have been punished severely as well electorally had it picked either side without that work of persuasion.
I think this debate will continue as the show goes on. I kind of want to talk...
Michael,
okay, go on.
Yeah, defend yourself.
You might still be in shock. Can you imagine the 17.4 million people who for the first time had voted, and then they believe politicians were just totally ignoring them? That's shock. And that's the reality of things. And I think, at times we've got to put our cards... I think we've got to put our cards on the table here. It's all right if we had picked the Remain side, which would have showed up many of the seats in the south in London with 30,000 majorities. Because, the argument that was given is that we could lose lots of seats in London. The vast majority of people in London who were making that argument had majorities in excess of 30,000. my argument always was we've got to make sure we look at what's happening in the areas where we've got majorities of, like I think we had about 45 offensive and defensive seats in the East Midlands, where we needed to shore it up because there were marginal seats. And there was the problem with the Tory party and the Brexit party. And we got it wrong, I'm afraid. And people need to understand that, there's life outside of London. There's life outside of the M25. And that's where we went wrong. We abandoned people, by the way. We really did. And I've got to say, Ash, I think the issue didn't just happen with Brexit. This happened many years ago, I think, in the Blair government. I think we lost 5 million voters during the period of the Blair government, which is a lot of good things. I've got to put that on record, done a lot of good things. But we began to lose the working class communities right from there, and we shouldn't discount and think that it's just happened since 2016, because it hasn't.
I want to move on in a moment to your stomping ground in the Northeast. First of all, you're watching Novara Media. You're watching Tisky Sour. As you know, this organisation is only possible because of your kind donations. If you are already a subscriber, thank you very much. If not, please go to support.novaramedia.com and donate the equivalent of 1 hour's wage a month, or give us a little post-election bonus. This Thursday, we have Novara Media's Christmas party. So to get tickets for that, go to buytickets.at/Novara Media. I invited Ian Lavery on the way up in the lift, but he's going back
I hope
to a constituency on Thursday evening.
Find Michael and what this place is.
It will be easier to find than what this place is. So I want to talk about Wansbeck and the North East in general. So, I mean, as you were saying, you think that many people, in the political class have failed to look beyond the M25. And I mean, we'll be the first to admit Novara Media is within the M25, and most of our guests live within the M25.
I'm so M25. I've got the initials of a London neighbourhood tattooed on my ribs. I am guilty as charged.
I wanted to ask you, what do you think, the Labour Party or the direction of the Labour Party or the political class in general have misunderstood about the North East?
Democracy.
Go on.
Democracy. I think democracy is the simple answer to all of this. I think a lot of people, not just in the North East, because it isn't just in the North East. I think we lost the
Northwest and the Midlands and North Wales.
I think it's right from the East Midlands to the West Midlands into Yorkshire and Humberside, into the Northwest and the Northeast, and then you've got a completely different political spectrum with regards to Brexit. In Scotland, isn't that really strange? So you've got London, the rest of the country, right up to Scotland, and then it changes again. So I mean, this is rather strange in political terms. It really is. But I just think that. It quite often in politics, during this campaign, I've sat in rooms with some of the brightest people mind ever, and at times I've just said, for heaven's sake, you should hear yourselves. Why have we not just got a simple message? Why do we not make things much less complicated? Instead of talking about trillions of dollars and millions of pounds in the economy, which is all very important, why do we not talk about things that matter to people so they understand? I always keep saying emotion, and I think that's what we had to do. I think the campaign was very good, by the way. I really do. I think the offer was brilliant. But I think there's that distrust that we ignored the voters in 2016, and I think that incensed people. You know what? My view was that we should leave, but I couldn't agree to leaving with any of the bills that were put before the Commons, because it would have been disastrous. It would have been catastrophic for people in my area. I mean, the general figures were each individual would lose £2,400. Now, if I stood on a manifesto in my constituency or anywhere saying, I want you to vote for me, but you're going to lose 2,000, I would get hammered. But the way in which things were polarised, Michael, I've never experienced before. It's like Brexit means Brexit. And when you mentioned, I went to the chap's house the other day, knocking on his door, right? What a decent fella he actually was. 40-year-old, blind, I sat there blind in one eye, nice house in an area, council area, in not far from where I live. Blind in one eye, severe epileptic, and he says, Ian, I'm not sure who I can vote for. He says, I think you're an excellent MP. I'm really pleased to meet you. I'm pleased you're sitting in my house. He says, but you know, I'm blind in one eye. I'm struggling. I cannot make ends meet. I've been using the food bank, and I'm not voting Liberal. He says, I'm not voting Liberal, but I think I might vote Brexit. What can you say? What can you say? And it's this polarisation which went right through. I don't think we ever expected what did happen, but certainly I predicted that there would be huge losses, but not on this scale. I really didn't. It's about trust in politicians, and it's about messaging. You know, you can have the best manifesto, which we did have. If you kind of get it through to individuals, if you kind of get that messaging into their sitting room to say this is how we're going to change your life, then it's very difficult. So it's about the messaging, how you get the narrative across, and you know, knocking on people's doors is great because you get the opportunity to speak to people. I had some great conversations with people, and they didn't have a clue what any politician was. They didn't have a clue about, you know, anything that any of the parties, but they were saying, we've got to get it done. Brexit means Brexit.
So, I mean, one thing that struck me during the campaign is that the polarisation of this country is on way more issues than simply Brexit. And one of the things that came up, and this is intimately connected with the sort of attacks that Jeremy was under night and day from the establishment media and the right-wing papers in particular, is that Jeremy was being attacked as a proxy for the values of multiculturalism and diversity. And I'll give you one example of where that became really clear to me, is that I knocked on a gentleman's door in one of the most deprived but also least diverse bits of North Yorkshire. So it wasn't one of those bits of Yorkshire where you've got a very strong Pakistani and Bangladeshi community. It was very, very racially homogenous. And he told me that he couldn't vote for Jeremy because he would let those Muslims and foreigners take over. And so that was going back to all those things, those, 13 pages in the Daily Mail, the national security, terrorist sympathiser. And simply because of Jeremy stepping down after this leadership election, that's not going to go away. Already seeing articles in newspapers like from Melanie Phillips saying that Islamophobia is a completely bogus concept, that Islamophobia isn't a form of racism because it's not irrational, that in fact to suggest that Islamophobia exists as a distinct form of oppression is itself anti-Semitic, is that what we're going to see is that Jeremy leaving front bench politics is not going to mean that those sort of attacks go away, because that sort of connection between a left-wing transformative economic project and its leadership and the values of multiculturalism, diversity, anti-racism, is that that's right in the sightlines of an incredibly divisive, nativist and hardline right wing. That's what we're up against for the next 5 years.
I totally agree with you. In my constituency, I think I'll not be far away, Ash, when I say that it's 99%, 99.odd% white.
Didn't know your constituency was a Coldplay concert, but do go on.
well, and when you knock on people's doors, people raise immigration. One man raised it with us, like just before the election, and he said, there's a school where they've got to learn 230 odd languages, and that's just not right. And this man was a very educated man. I said, well, where was that? And he says, well, in London. And I said, but this is like Warrensbeck. you'll not believe this. I mean, the multiculturalism, in my view, I've learned lots and lots in the last 2 elections. And it's been a hell of a journey for me, because I'm like a working class lad from the pits. And I've never experienced multiculturalism, never experienced it, because we haven't got it. It's a huge issue in the country, because it's split again. And people who haven't enjoyed multiculturalism, like we've got here in the south, and like we've got in the Midlands, and people who haven't enjoyed it are frightened of it. They're really frightened of the fact that it's the Daily Mail, and it's the media outlets, it's the right-wing press saying, the Muslims are going to take over the world, and people on the doorstep. We haven't got that in the northeast. I went to Wolverhampton, and it was absolutely wonderful. 200 people there, all part of the BAME community. They were brilliant, and I went to Peterborough during the by-election of Peterborough. First time I've ever been in a mosque. I don't have a church that often, by the way, but they said, Ian,
you've probably gone to mosques more often than I have. You're putting me to
shame.
Well,
I've only been to one. I didn't know what really what it was, because it doesn't bother me what religion you are, what colour your skin. Never even comes into it for me. And they said, Ian, will you go to a mosque? And I went in, and it was one of the most unbelievable feelings I had. And I'm not kidding you, by the way. And I tell everybody this. It was so warm. The people were absolutely fantastic. There was the elders there, and there was the younger families. The only thing I couldn't understand, and I'm sure I might get criticised for this, was the fact that the men and the women were separate. And I think that's obviously part of the culture, and that's fair enough, by the way. That's the way it is. But I left, when I went to the car park, I was with 2 women, and I said, I'll see you inside. It was a Friday night. I said, I'll see you inside. So we went one way, they went the other. And I went in there. So I've been in the mosque once, and it was absolutely amazing. So, immigration comes up on the doorstep. It absolutely does. And it always has done with the white working class, by the way. It always has done. But in reality, they're just being fed this rubbish about multiculturalism, that, what's going to happen. But generally, it's the most warming thing. If I could change where I live, it would be to a more multicultural society, because it's so much better. And I mean, I'm saying that as a coal miner who, people not know what I'm talking about in my area when I say that, but I just, we're missing it, man. We're missing it. We're missing something huge. But right up north, people are frightened of it, and they shouldn't be frightened of people with a different colour skin. We're all the same, man, Ash. And this is the sort of thing that's coming up on the doorstep, and it's futile, it's wrong. But trying to explain that to people gets you in all sorts of trouble.
But I think that there are 3 ways in which the left can deal with the issue of anti-immigration and xenophobic sentiments. One is pander to it. The second one is that sort of very rigid, very uncompromising, and very moralising way of dealing with it. And the third thing, which I think the Labour Party, since Corbyn has come in, has certainly attempted to do, and it needs to be built on, is persuade people. And I think viewing it as the beginning of a conversation and a persuasive aim is something which the left in general needs to get much better at. And I'm talking about also people who I consider my comrades in the anti-racist movement, so on and so forth, is that when all you've got is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And having different tools, having different tactics at our disposal is going to be so important in these next few years. And I think that in terms of anti-racists on the left, we do need to come up more quickly with persuasive strategies. We need to build an anti-racist social majority, even in areas which haven't experienced a great deal of migration or diversity. And it's not just, a southern thing. I mean, half my family are from Bradford. It's one of the youngest, most diverse places in the country. Similar with Manchester, similar, with Liverpool. So I think it's less about north and south and a little bit more about metropolitan and town.
I maybe so, yeah. I think you're right. One of the big problems, by the way, in society is exactly what you've said there, you know, Ash. It's not necessarily north and south. It's about the metropolitan areas and the towns and the villages. I think you're right. That goes for Brexit. It goes for lots of other things as well.
And that's
because
been
you
the
know
story
when
since
people,
New Labour.
you know, like when we talk about immigration, or when we talk about child poverty or pensioner poverty, it's as if people in the north think that doesn't happen in London. Well, it absolutely does. We've got huge pockets of people in London, one of the richest cities, if not the richest city in the world. We've got massive problems with poverty, with pensioner poverty, with child poverty, with family poverty, with in-work poverty. And I think you're right. We've got to get this right and not generalise on things, really.
I think we've touched on a bunch of issues about how we will win back these areas, and that's what I want to sort of move on to, because I suppose, I mean, it's quite clear that your main explanation for why we lost so many seats in the north of England and the Midlands and well, all around England was because of our Brexit position. But in 5 years' time, Brexit is going to be a done deal. It will be over. And you could be very optimistic about that and say, oh, without this second referendum issue, Labour can win these seats back incredibly easily. Or you could say that a whole new bunch of challenges will become apparent once the Brexit crisis or Brexit drama is complete, and we might get another shock all over again in 2024 because there's another issue that we haven't quite realised that
My
we
heart
haven't
can't
got
take
quite
it.
right.
I don't want another shock, man. My constitution's too delicate for that kind of thing.
Before I get you to answer that, though, you're watching Tisky Sour. I'm not going to ask for your money again. What I am going to say is if you go on Twitter and tweet the hashtag Tisky Sour, we will go to some of your questions and comments as they come in and at the end of the show. Ian, how do we win back seats in the northeast?
Trust, investment, equality. They're three of the simple issues. I think trust is most important because, you know, we have got a massive London-centric problem. When I say a problem, it is a problem, but we've got an issue in the Labour Party where we've got nearly 500,000 members. We've had 20-odd thousand join, you know. 20-odd thousand new members since the election.
I'm one of them. I finally joined the party.
Congratulations.
As of 3 weeks ago.
I thought
You've been on at me for ages about it.
I really have. So at least my canvassing has produced one more member in the left-wing superstar that Ash is. So I'm claiming that credit.
Still not got my card though, so I assume it's in the post.
It's too late to cancel it now.
Autumn cancel it. We've got a huge challenge. And you've knocked us right off me thread. What I was saying there with regards.
So we're talking about how we win back the parts of England that we've lost in this election.
We've got to listen to people. You know, we haven't got the divine right to be a party. It cannot be a London-centric party. It cannot be a party that just determines policy for the whole of the party and the whole of the country based on what happens in this wonderful city of London. And we've got to make sure that we listen to people. We've got to make sure that the investment is in these areas. We've heard about the Northern Powerhouse. It hasn't produced a single big project, certainly not in my area. And we've got to make people's lives better.
I mean, the Labour Party manifesto was, to be fair, though, and I suppose this is why it's challenging, because you can't fault the Labour manifesto for not offering enough investment for these parts of the country. So there's got to be something
how many people has read the Labour Party manifesto? Have you read it?
I skimmed it because I made a video about it.
Have you read it like from back to front?
I read sort of the first
second
paragraph of each chapter.
Back to front.
I read it back to front.
What's on page 35?
I cannot remember
Oh,
it.
That's just not good enough. The point of
He's expecting me to be a Hafiz. A Hafiz is the name of someone who can recite the Quran, and he wants me to be a manifesto Hafiz.
The point I'm making is that the manifesto was brilliant, but it's how you get the individual policies in that manifesto into the sitting rooms, into the living rooms, and a lot of people who are totally isolated, disenfranchised from society. I suggested that it was a hammers under the home type people we need to get into their sitting rooms. People who get up in the morning, who are just managing, who don't want to rock the boat in any way, shape or form. They see people on benefits, they see people suffering, having to use food banks, and they don't want to lurch into that sort of unfortunate position. So that they're not happy, but they're just managing, and that they think that if by not rocking the boat things will be okay. How do we get the message? We cannot keep just knocking on people's doors as a party and saying, hello, I'm Ian Lavery from the Labour Party. Who did you vote for last time? Who are you voting for this time? Because the reality is we're not getting the right results. We're not getting the right data. We've got to engage with people. We've got to discuss with people. And not just 6 weeks before the election. We've got to be seen in these communities. We've got to be leading campaigns. We've got to have community organising. That's the key to it. Community organising. So if you've got problems in your maternity ward at the hospital, if the A&E is looking to close, if you cannot get an appointment with a GP, we've got to make sure.
Apparently your hand is coming out in the sound.
No, right, I cannot help it. I get easily.
It's a very inspiring way of speaking. I think it's just coming out in the...
I normally do that, by the way, but never mind.
You can tell that he learned oratory in a trade union. It's the like.
It is. I brought my hand one day. Anyway, the truth is that we've got to be in the community. We've got to be seen in the community, man. We've got to have, and I think the community organising, by the way, is a fantastic way forward. I think we need to set that up, because this is by the way, this project of ours, changing the world, transforming society, isn't a 2-year project. We shouldn't be knocked. It's not, Michael. It's not called the struggle for nothing. It really isn't. It's a struggle, and we get knocked back. You dress yourself down again, and then you fight back, because what we've got to offer. If we can get that into the sitting room, into the living room, to different people, different organisations, we'll win an election hands down. Brexit's buggered everything up. It's as simple as that. And I'm on your show saying buggered rather than the word I would rather use.
Go on, use it. We're not actually regulated by Ofcom.
You can say whatever you want.
I'm not normally like that anyway. I didn't swear.
I've got an absolute potty mouth, so I'll say it for you. Brexit fucked it. I mean, look, I like the idea of a Lavery for every living room, and this being the centrepiece of the next campaign. But one thing that I will add to what you're saying, because it's not a contradiction at all, it's an addition, is across the country, Labour's support comes from working age people. Like, that is still solid, that is still core. So ages 18, in this election it was 39, is the crossover point from majority Labour support to majority Tory support. In the previous election it was 45 was the crossover age. So still commanding the majority of working age people, still have a huge amount of support from the asset poor young. And where there's been most trouble has been from people in older age brackets, and also homeowners. And it's no good saying, well, what we're going to do is wait for our support to age into those brackets and dominate demographically. Because if you look at the constituencies that were lost, is that you've got lots of those young people moving out of those towns into metropolitan areas. Absolutely. In order to look for work. So this is a place in which the changing face of who the working class is and what it's like to be working age in this country is overlapping with the sort of age distribution of Labour's core support, and is overlapping with this problem of geographic spread and who's where and where you need to show up a vote and where it's concentrating a bit too much. And so I think that presents a set of factors which need to be responded to in a way which is very thoughtful and very strategic, because that goes beyond Brexit, and that goes beyond a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of how do you have a political project which is both economically transformative and a home for those progressive social values which we really hold dear. And it's going to be tricky. I don't have any answers for precisely how it is you do that. I do think that building community power in places where it's been decimated since Thatcher came in 1979 is of utmost importance. But I imagine that there's going to be a lot more ideas to come in terms of addressing those issues with age distribution and with geographic spread.
I just want to say we're going to take your questions in a while. So start putting them in the comments now, and our producer Fox will start collecting them. If you want to tweet your questions, put the hashtag TiskiSauron and put them up on Twitter.
I think you're right. as I said there, I think the community organising, when you look at the election results, where we have had our community organising units, you're seeing huge differences in vote share. You've seen huge differences.
Is that true? Is that, has someone done an analysis yet of ones where you've had because there is a big community organising unit, and they've been in some constituencies and not others.
Well,
my inside source of the community organising unit says that where the community organising unit was active and good, you had smaller decline in vote share, and of course, where the community organising unit was doing a spectacular job in Putney, they of course won. I think that in terms of the tactics which were used in Putney, in particular, the work that they were doing on housing, the work they were doing in Clyde House, which is a block which was completely, affected by damp. You had water dripping through the light fittings, residents saying they were concerned it was going to be the new Grenfell. The community organising unit made it a priority to hold that dodgy housing association to account and also make it a centrepiece of Labour's campaigning. And so I think that showed a model of how you can build trust in communities that don't traditionally trust Labour. And so if community organising is just a fancier word for having rallies, not going to work. If it's that slow work of building trust and addressing needs, real needs in the community outside of an electoral cycle, that is definitely something that can be done not just in metropolitan areas, not just in London, but in the north, in the Midlands, in towns and in villages too.
Well, if we're going to be successful, it hasn't just got to be working in London. But I think you're right. I've done lots of community organising events, and we've got some brilliant community organising teams out there. We've got a good, fantastic community organising team at headquarters, and done lots of good work, really enthusiastic people. And the idea of community organising is have these big rallies, but not just have these big rallies and then everybody goes home for a cup of tea and think, hey, Ian Lavery, that big fat lad with the grey hair, he was a good speaker. We've got to have a spin-off from it. And the whole idea of community organising is getting community champions. People signed up, people who sign up and go door knocking, people who do the campaigning that's required to make sure we get a return of Labour seats. We did a great community campaign in Putney.
It was Putney.
You guys won it.
It was Lavery what won it.
I want to talk about the future of the Labour Party. I've
got to say that
it
was great. Me and Ash turned up outside Putney tube station, and it was like blinding down with rain. It was black. It was foggy. And I had it took me 2 hours to get there, and I was asked to speak, and I got up. Ash was slightly late, if you can remember.
I was late.
And I says, I'm pleased to be here. I've travelled. And this bloke heckles, he says, get on with it. He says, get on with it. We've got to get away canvassing. But it was brilliant. Putney that night, there was with 200 people there canvassing. Just before the election, there was apparently 700 people in Putney. Yeah. But when you look at the Midlands, where we needed to win, when you look at Yorkshire and Humberside, the North, the North East, we had fantastic teams on the ground, but the teams were 5 and 6, 10 and 20, and that's the big difference. It's no good, honestly. By the way,
how do you do that though? How do you build the membership in? Say in your what is the CLP membership in your seat, for example?
The CLP membership is in my constituency about 800, 900.
Yeah, so that's low compared to like a London constituency. Right?
I've got to say that we had the campaign team for me this year was absolutely brilliant. The people who came out on, it was cold, it was freezing cold up in the northeast, and the amount of people that came out was, some of them every day, 3 or 4 sessions a day. They were remarkable, but we didn't have these wonderful 700 here, and we cannot just keep saying we're going to take Ian Duncan-Smith out and we're going to take Boris Johnson out and have thousands of people there on a Saturday, have a rally, and then nothing happens. And there's nobody in the areas where we need them, in the defensive and the offensive areas where we need to make sure we shore up the vote.
But it's got to be more than getting your canvases out and you get out the vote operation. And
let's go on to the Labour leadership super quick because I want to get
Sorry. And this could be the community organising thing. It's actually about building social institutions which are there all the time, not just in the electoral.
All right, we're talking about the leadership election now.
Absolutely.
Putting my foot down. People in the comments are asking, Ian Lavery, are you standing for leader of the Labour Party?
No.
Deputy leader of the Labour Party?
No.
Why
You sure?
not?
What I'll say, I mean, I've got to be honest. I mean, I've been overwhelmed by the support I've had, the requests I've had, the emails, the tweets on Facebook for both leader and both deputy leader of the party. All I would say is that this isn't about me. I'm not saying, well, politicians should never say never, but I'm waiting to see who the runners and the riders are, because I think we have got a good array of talent. We really have. I think for the Labour Party leader this time, I'm afraid I've got to say it almost definitely should be a woman. It really should be a woman. It's about time we had some sort of equality at the very, 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 very top of the party. So I would think that we should be. In the rule book, we cannot do, you say, Michael, but it's a shame that we cannot have an all-women shortlist for the leader of the Labour Party. So, as far as the leader of the Labour Party is concerned, I would say that as far as the deputy leader is concerned, I've been in discussions with people, and I'll continue to discuss things.
So are you ready to endorse anyone for leader or deputy leader?
I think it's. I made a mistake. I made a mistake in endorsing Andy Burnham too early on in the race in 2015 against Jeremy Corbyn, and it wasn't against Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy hadn't agreed to stand. So very early on, I had discussions with Andy, who I think's a smashing bloke, by the way. I had discussions with him, and he gave us some guarantees with the trade union movement, and I supported him straight away. It was a mistake because, in hindsight, I would have voted for Jeremy anyway. So I'm going to wait. I'll discuss it with people, and we have got a project to keep at, to ramp up. I'll wait and see who the runners and the riders are. I like a bet, you see. I like a bet on the horses. I like a bet on the dogs. But the good thing is you've got to understand who the riders and who the runners are, and that's what I'll wait.
So the subtext there is that he's waiting for my local constituency MP, Bambos Charalambos, to throw his hat in the ring. Just so we can one day say,
he's a decent man.
Bambos Charalambos, leader of the opposition.
What
a man.
What criteria are you going to judge by? So what do you think, other than a woman? You said that you think the leader needs to be a woman. What else do you think they have to prove, I suppose?
think they've got to prove honesty, strength. They've got to be strong in the political vision. They've got to have an understanding about what the Labour Party was actually formed for.
Do you think their Brexit position matters?
I think the Brexit, they've got to get through, no matter who puts up, they've got to explain why and how they supported whatever they did in terms of Brexit, because it's going to be important, by the way. It really is. Because we've got to cross that barrier. The thing with the Brexit position, Michael, Jeremy trying to keep the country together. And I think that was the right thing to do. I know that caused problems both sides, on the Leave and on the Remain side, but we were together, and I think that's important. What we've got to do, the leader and the deputy leader have got to show humility. We've got to understand where we are at this moment in time, and they've got to have a plan of how the Labour Party can come to power in 5 years' time. I'm not buying this as a 10-year project, by the way. Sorry, a 10-year, we're in the wilderness for 10 years. I'm not buying that. You know what? The way that Boris Johnson, the racist, the misogynist, the liar, the way that he governs this country will be critical in the next few months, in the next couple of years. There could be huge issues facing this country a lot sooner than 5 years' time, a lot sooner than 10 years' time. So we've got to get the right person, the strong person. And one of the most important things, Michael, is that we continue to fight for the people who would benefit from a transformational government, from a transformational manifesto like we have produced in the 2019. I think they're key issues. So it's carrying on the project, keeping hold of the mantle, keeping a hold of the Book of Hope, the policies that's in there, and continuing with that. That's really important to me.
I'm going to look through the hashtag, so we've got some carry on.
I'm going to let you guys continue without me, I now have to run off to spend some time on Sky News with none other than Guido Fawkes' Tom Harwood.
Oh.
And you can tell by the smile on my face how much I've been looking forward to it. So I will
You'll
not
be brilliant. You'll
keep
be brilliant.
myself
You'll
away
be
from
brilliant.
that company any longer. Ian, a pleasure as always. I really like our little odd couple double act, little and large. And I'll see you in Putney.
I'm going to take that as a compliment, right? I'm going to take that as a huge compliment.
Some of the tweets. Ben tweets on the hashtag Titsky Sour. Corbynism's major mistakes have come out of compromises, in particular mandatory reselections, his views on foreign policy, and indeed the eventual second referendum policy. Agreed. Do you think that Corbyn and Corbynism has compromised too much?
I think there's something to be said in that, but you've got to understand Jeremy Corbyn as an individual. He's got fantastic left-wing credentials, which he wouldn't compromise on. He's a very principled man, which he wouldn't compromise on his principles. But we've had a lot of issues in the party since since we tried to take on the establishment. And Jeremy's role is to try and keep the party together. And we've already mentioned at length the difference probably between the south and the north. But I think at times that there is a need for a leader like Jeremy to compromise, because he doesn't like confrontation. He's not a confrontational.
Do you want the next leader to be a bit more confrontational, though? Because, I mean, if you're taking on the establishment within the party or outside of the party, sometimes you need to be you might need someone who's a bit more decisive, who's willing to pick a fight.
Of course, I mean, I'm very close to Jeremy, and I've been with Jeremy. And I've said to him on numerous occasions, Jeremy, why on earth did you not react to that? Why did you not stand up for yourself? And Jeremy always says, Ian, the lower they get, the higher the bar I raise. Now that's admirable. He'll always say, Ian, I'll not get in the gutter with these people. And I've always said, Jeremy, I'll get in the gutter for you. Yeah. And he says, that's not acceptable neither. So you've got to understand Jeremy's politics. And lots of people support this. I mean, during the TV debates, when they said it's a question of trust, Jeremy, what do you think about a question of... It was an open goal to have a go at Boris Johnson. But Jeremy wouldn't. I was at Leeds with Momentum, and they were screaming, tell him, Jeremy. Yeah. And I was saying, Jeremy's just not going to do this. Jeremy will not. Jeremy is a very principled man, and he wouldn't get in the gutter. So the new leader might have different characteristics to Jeremy, perhaps might need different characteristics to Jeremy, might need to be more confrontational. Who knows? But, Jeremy's Jeremy.
Mandatory reselection was also in that.
Mandatory reselection, I mean, that was discussed in the Democracy Review. We discussed it at a conference in 2018. We came up with the new rule, on the trigger ballots. The trigger ballots were fine. They obviously cut short with the election. All I would say about that is that, if you're an MP, you should be accountable to the people who you represent, and you shouldn't be afraid of democracy. There was a huge debate in the party, and there was a compromise. Quite often, when you've got a party of 500,000 people, quite often you've got to try and come to some compromise.
It could be an issue in the leadership election, though, right? It could be the case that members want to go for someone who's not willing to compromise on something like open selections.
Well, I think the trigger ballot system, which we've got in place now, under the rules, if people, if CLPs wanted rid of the sitting MP, or they wanted them, wanted on the trigger ballot system to bring them into an open selection, they could do that.
Yeah, I mean, the argument is that it makes it a negative fight instead of a positive one. Where
but at the end of the day, I think the CLPs have got the power to do that if they want to do that.
Caroline Bell says, can confirm Wansbeck was bloody cold, but it was worth it. Loved the team we had out day after day in hail, snow and wind.
Who's that, Callum Bell?
Tough cookies in the north. Caroline Bell.
Oh, is it Caroline Ball?
It says on my notes Caroline Bell, but it might be Caroline Ball. Absolute
fantastic, phenomenal, and it was great. She did a marvellous job.
It was Caroline Ball.
Hello, Caroline, how are you? She was brilliant. Out real, ill and shine. knocking on people's doors, engaging people in conversations, and that's what we had. They were brilliant, honestly. We didn't have the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds like we had in Putney, but the dedication, the passion, the commitment was there in its entirety. It was brilliant, man.
Hecatonica Sakaron asks, how does Labour gain the trust of pensioners? So, Labour has a problem with older voters.
Do you know what Ash mentioned before, like the age group who vote for the Labour Party? So what we're seeing at the younger level, that a huge percentage now support the Labour Party. Then when you move into like middle age, we've still got a huge percentage support.
So up to 40, I think after 44 it swings to the Conservatives.
After 44, 45, and then after 55, it's unbelievable. It's like a conveyor belt, but once you reach that point of 45, you jump out of another conveyor belt. You're not sure, and then when you jump from the next one up to 55 and above, you're not a Labour supporter. I've asked a million times. I've asked all these experts, can you explain this? And there's nobody come up with any explanation how we do that. But we've been very supportive. We had the triple lock in place. For pensioners, we offered lots of things for the pensioners at this election, and it is very difficult to break down exactly how you can break into the elderly vote, for the want of a better term.
Do you think it's about culture, or do you think it's that they own homes? Because there's lots of arguments about Labour losing the working class, and then other people argue, well, actually, these are potentially people who own homes, so they're potentially benefiting from the type of economy
I think it's when you get to like a certain age, what you want in life is security. And if you feel at that time that you're okay.
How does Labour offer security? Because that's going to be a big challenge for the party, right? That's the public presumably didn't think that Labour were offering them security.
I think one of the most important things at this election was the policy on the real living wage of £10 an hour. And that gave security to people in work, it gave hope to people in work, and that would, particularly 16-year-olds, right up to 21. And then the way through that would be, give people dignity in work, give them fair pay in work, give them the opportunity.
But I suppose you were offering them that this time, right? And especially for older people. So how do you offer older people security?
Well, what you do is you make sure that for example, what we did, two big issues or two big policies, apart from the triple lock, like ensuring that the pensions remained as they were and they would be increased with inflation, all of that sort of stuff. We did say that we would support the WASPy women. We did say that we would support the miners through the Mine Workers Pension Scheme. These were additional things that we did propose for elderly people. And it is a massive issue, but we did guarantee lots of things for elderly people.
Do you find that in your constituency that if you knock on a door and it's someone older, you're like you presume they're probably going to vote Conservative, and if they're younger, you think they'll vote Labour?
To be honest, it's the first time in my life that
you've had a large number of Conservatives in the constituency.
Like we've seen. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of the programme. My majority is normally unshakable at 10.5, 11,000. It doesn't matter, the shocks either way normally, but I think that I think a lot of people this time, they'll not tell you they're voting Tory. A lot of people, some might, but a lot of people they'll not tell you they're voting Tory, but they voted Tory this time.
There's a big debate, I suppose, both in the media and among Labour politicians. Was it Brexit or was it Corbyn? What you'll hear is that most of Corbyn's critics say actually the main issue on the doorstep wasn't Brexit. It was people didn't trust Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister. Some of the polls back that up. I don't know what you think about that particular.
If you have a look at the attacks on Jeremy Corbyn, there were initially, it wasn't Brexit, and it wasn't about Remain or Leave, and it wasn't about Brexit. This is what a lot of the right-wing media was saying, and right-wing MPs. Now they've lost that argument. Now the Remain argument has been lost. They really have. And anybody with any sense, any common sense will understand the reason why we've lost the seats in the north is because of the issue of Brexit. But there was the issue of how the press have been successful in demonising what is a thoroughly decent individual. You see, I cannot... Michael, when I knock on somebody's door and I know them, and they say, Ian, I cannot vote for the Labour Party this time. Why? And if they say, well, it's Jeremy, for example, I know they're absolutely wrong in what they're saying. It's what they've read, it's what they've heard, it's what they see in the Daily Mail. I'm very, very close to Jeremy. And I know, as I've said like probably 100 times already, what a remarkable individual he is. But it just shows what sort of influence the press can have on individuals that, running up to an election. Everybody doesn't watch the television. Everybody doesn't watch or participate on Facebook or Twitter. A lot of people still read the media, particularly the elderly people. They still read the tabloids and the red tops. And it's been difficult. Jeremy's had a real rough time on this.
So that's essentially one of the arguments as to why older people are so Tory at the moment, is because they read the Daily Mail and the Sun. Because younger people don't read the newspapers.
That's right.
Sarah asks, if a left-wing candidate wins leadership, do you think the right of the party will treat them the same way as they treated Corbyn?
Well, I'm appealing to the Labour Party. I'm appealing to the PLP. I'm appealing to the membership. We've got to get rid of this toxicity in our party. And there has been problems. When you've got a party of 500,000 members, it's very, very difficult, very, very challenging. However, the alternative could be that we would have a party of 5,000 members, and there wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't have a party. So we've got huge challenges. In my view, is we should be comradely, we should be respectful. We should listen to what each other have got to say. If you and I have got completely different views, so what? I still think you're a smashing individual, and hope you think the same about me. Yeah. We might disagree, but we've got to have the debate, and we've got to have policies, and we've got to move forward, because we might disagree. But while we're disagreeing, we've still got homeless people out there. We've still got people who haven't got food in their belly. We've still got kids who are going to school with holes in their shoes. And we've still got the 5 billionaires at the top of society in this country have got more money than 14 million of the poorest people in society. So we can debate it. We've got to be constructive. We've got to get on with it. But we should always remember what we're there for, and that's to better the lives of people who really need, not just the people who need a bump up, but people right across society. We've got to transform society for everyone. That's what we stand for.
Final question. If the next leader of the Labour Party is as left-wing as Jeremy Corbyn, we can expect them, one, to be, as much as you'd like there to be, a peaceful coexistence within the Labour Party, we can expect there to be attacks from centrist or right-wing MPs. We can also expect there to be just as many attacks potentially from the media and from the newspapers, and Corbyn entered this election damaged. As you say, it was often because of misportrayals in the media, but it's unquestionable that sometimes when people were knocking on doorsteps, people were worried about Jeremy Corbyn. The polls bear that out. What do you think the next leader of the Labour Party can learn from this experience? How can the next leader of the Labour Party, if they are left wing and if they are subject to all of these attacks, come out stronger than Jeremy Corbyn did?
Well, I think you mentioned before, you asked me what I thought, what would be the main attributes required to be the leader of the Labour Party. And they've got to be terribly strong. They've got to be terribly focused. They've got to have that resilience. They've got to have this understanding that they're going to be absolutely scrutinised, if not torn to shreds in the press. Because the press we've got now, Michael, and I'm sure you agree with this, if they haven't got a story on you, they'll make something up, and it quite often sticks. So we need to have somebody who continues and understands the pressures they're going to be under, but doesn't let them affect the vision of the future, and the vision of the future what the Labour Party actually stands for at this moment in time. It's going to be very difficult for anybody, by the way, to achieve that, but that's what's required.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Ian.
Thanks.
Well done for all your campaigning on the campaign, even if it didn't go quite the way we were all hoping. Tomorrow night you will have a very different perspective on whether or not Labour should have adopted a second referendum, because Paul Mason will be in the studio. I won't be hosting, it will be Aaron Bastani, but it will be a show not to be missed. So tune in tomorrow at the same time as ever. Novara Media Titski Sour is only possible because of your kind donations. If you are already a subscriber, thank you very much. If not, please go to support.novaramedia.com and give us the equivalent of 1 hour's wage a month. We have a party on Thursday. You can see us all there. Let me find the particular website for it. I can't find the website for it. I'll tweet it later this evening. And it's coming up on screen potentially. Fabulous. Good night.